Former LA City Councilman Jose Huizar was just sentenced to 13 years in federal prison by Judge Walter, and I'm angry. I'm angry because the councilman knew better, and he had an opportunity to mitigate. Instead, he engaged in messaging that was, how do I say it, horrific, tragic, sickening. Indeed, the letter that I'm going to go through in this video today is nearly as bad as the letter that Elizabeth Holmes turned in, and that I think helped lead to her very lengthy federal prison sentence. For transparency, our team is involved in this case, though I can tell you, we were not working with the former councilman, because if he were, he would never have turned in this sort of message or narrative. In fact, as I read it, I wonder if the lawyers actually ever read it, if they got it. This looks fantastic. This looks great. Because had they read it or truly understood what stakeholders like a federal judge, probation, or prosecutor want, they would have redlined this damn document so many times they would eventually said, this thing needs to be thrown in the trash. I empathize with his family, with his children, who through no fault of their own will suffer, and suffer more harshly than they should because of their father's, not just the conduct. We make bad decisions as human beings, I know, but it's the doubling down and the blaming and excusing and not recognizing what someone like Judge Walter wants to hear, which is the focus on the victims. I'm from Los Angeles. I go there quite a bit for meetings. I live in Orange County. I see the defecating on the streets, the homelessness, the drug addiction, the poverty. And I think it's tragic that we're going to warehouse this person for 13 years in a minimum security camp at great taxpayer expense, because we need that money to go elsewhere. The city that I was born and raised is broken. And I know the government would argue it's broken in part to the former councilman. I don't want to add more pain to his family, but if it is your name versus the United States of America, you are in crisis. You are freaking out. And as articulated in any of my books, like Lessons from Prison, you can still get for free at White Collar Advice. You will know the hardest part of this experience is the waiting and wondering. And now as the councilman will endure the regret. What could I have done differently? Let's dive into this letter, shall we? It starts off horrifically. Since we're on the theme of Los Angeles, remember when the Dodgers got beat by the Diamondbacks and Kershaw gave up 6 in the first? In fact, I went to get a drink and then I came back and we were down 3-0. And about 4 minutes later, we were down 6-0. You kind of had a sense it wasn't going to be a great series. I'm still enduring trauma from the Dodgers loss over the last 2 postseasons. But when I read this first line of this narrative, it was akin to Kershaw giving up 6 in the first. Let me begin by stating that I apologize to my family. Horrific, awful. You want to know why? I know Judge Walter. I've been to a number of his sentencing hearings. You know what federal judges are most concerned with? Victims. Victims always come before friends, family, your own suffering. When I read this line, I said, this is going to go badly. And of course it does. Continuing, I never imagined being in the situation that I'm in. Yes, we recognize that, former councilman. We all know that. The judge knows that. When I graduated USC in 1997 as a student athlete, then began building my career in Century City at Bear Stearns and then UBS, and eventually saw my name versus the United States of America, it was not a background that I had expected. Didn't think prison would be a part of my life trajectory. The judge knows that you're wasting valuable real estate, because the way a personal narrative should open is, I accept full responsibility for creating victims. And I know my words in this letter mean very little without an action plan moving forward. Indeed, Your Honor, since I saw that it was my name versus the United States of America, I want to walk you through what I've done to make amends to my victims, my constituents, and my family. And I know I'm going to prison. Here is the plan that I'm going to continue to build while I am inside. Why is that relevant? Judges have told us they feel defendants tell them what they want to hear. And without follow through, without evidence, it didn't happen. Or they think it's happy talk. You're telling them exactly what they want to hear. Do not waste valuable real estate in a letter by focusing on yourself or your family and telling judges things they already know, like you never imagined that you would be here. I'm not going to go through the whole letter. If I did, we'd be here for days because I have a lot to say, but I'm going to cover things that I believe are salient, because if it's your name versus the United States of America, I want you to do better and profit from the losses and the bad choices this former councilman made. I'm angry. Should have done better. We got to warehouse him now for 13 years in a minimum security camp. What a waste of money. Not saying there shouldn't be a sanction. Not saying he shouldn't go to prison. 13 years, bad messaging. Should blame no one but himself. He articulates in this letter, I was raised by my hardworking parents that taught me right from wrong. How? Can you give us an example? Anything specific you can share with the judge about how your parents taught you right from wrong? How about who are your parents? Where were they born? How were they raised? How were you born? How were you raised? When did you begin to work? When did you go to college and why? What are some choices you've made throughout your life that speak to your character or as a person who you claim to have integrity? It is a good line, but it's a throwaway unless you provide specific examples of how they taught you right from wrong. The next line is as bad as the first. My whole life was dedicated to do the right thing and help those in need. As evidenced by the plea agreement and the lengthy federal prison sentence and the victims you created and the money you took on the side by facilitating deals and bribes and all that nonsense, that is a lie. It's not true. My whole life was dedicated to doing the right thing. No, it was not. How easy would it be to convey an honest, authentic message, which is all judges want, an honest and authentic message? Your Honor, I built my career and went into public office with good aspirations, with a desire to impact and help people. In time, I went rogue. I succumbed to temptation. I was vulnerable, easy to exploit. So I can't tell you that I have always dedicated my life to doing the right thing. For a period of time, I did. But from the day that I started taking bribes until the day that I was caught, I was corrupt, and there are consequences that should follow. And I hope my story serves as a deterrence to others who are thinking about crossing the line, especially when you are elected to office and you are expected to represent the people who have elected you. Better, honest messaging. Continuing, I blame the overzealous FBI agents and prosecutors for wanting to make a name for themselves. So right out of the gate, the people that are arresting you and who will have an influence in recommending how long you should go to prison probably would have been a good idea to strike via a red line edit. I'd like to see the red line. Can someone tell me how many iterations of this document there were back and forth? If I sound angry and sarcastic, it's because it's sickening that these kids are going to be away from their dad for 13 years. He had an opportunity to do better. You don't call FBI agents and prosecutors overzealous. That makes them angrier. You don't get what you want by insulting people, former councilman, especially in a personal narrative to the judge, and especially after you claim to accept responsibility. Terrible messaging. What do prosecutors want? They want to advance their career. They care about victims. They want to look good on television. They want to run for office. They want to be a judge. They're going to become a defense attorney someday, charging $1,000 an hour. Try not to insult them, any of those who are watching this and who are someday going to create the letter on your own or with our team. But if it's with our team, it's going to have the right messaging. Victims, 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 what you've learned, why you'll never return to another courtroom with evidence, not happy talk, what your plans are moving forward with evidence and a plan built in. It's just not words on a page. There's got to be evidence and there's got to be a plan. And I saw none of that here in this letter. His lawyers tried to articulate nonprofit work that he had done. But like most defendants, all of the mitigation was outsourced to the lawyers, except this letter. He tries to articulate in this letter that as the investigation went on, he realized there was no one to blame but himself. That should have been the first sentence. Second sentence after he says, I apologize for creating victims. Then he tries to argue, he tries to get into the specifics that it wasn't about money. He never really needed those things, that at one point he accepted a job for $24,000 a year before he ran for office. You know what would have made more sense? If he said, at one point I accepted a job for $24,000, and in time, because of my position of power and wanting more niceties in life, wanting more things that come with my position of power, I began to use that power to take advantage and enrich myself. And I always knew that it was wrong. I always knew that it was wrong. Instead, he takes a fundamentally different approach, which is I was working long hours and I felt I was, entitled to some things because of the sacrifices that I was making. It's very nuanced, but it's important. Be honest. We had a client recently get sentenced and he was scared to death because he is a rich dude, the type of dudes that people don't like in this climate, the rich, white privilege, whatever y'all want to call him, he is. He's worth nearly $1 billion. And he said, my judge is going to fillet and punish me because I'm a rich dude who never should have ended up in this courtroom. You know what we did? We owned it. We talked about it. We told the judge. You know what the judge said? I appreciate you for recognizing that and acknowledging that, because that's exactly what I was thinking. You are right. You never should have been here. Own it. Talk about it. It's better to say that I got corrupt. I like the trappings of success. I like the way that people lionized me. I like the way that people looked at me, rather than saying, I worked very long days and I just thought it was, I wanted to reward myself for the sacrifices. Sacrifices, again, as we transition to page 5, my mistakes harmed those that are dearest to me and those that believed in me. I was blessed with a beautiful family, a great career, and wonderful friends. Coming from nothing, I worked hard to make a good life for myself and my family. Few things to unpack here. 1, my mistakes harm those that are dearest to me and those that believed in me. Continuing to focus on himself and his family. Bad messaging. I was blessed with a beautiful family. More about the family. Don't hear anything about the victims of Los Angeles who were harmed by him. Coming from nothing, I worked hard to make a good life. This comes back to how he should have opened the letter after he said, I apologize to my victims. And he said his parents taught him right from wrong. For those who say I speak too fast, keep up because I'm angry. I was raised with nothing, he said. Tell us, what was it like to be raised with nothing? What was it like for your parents to teach you right from wrong? What was it like to see others have more from you? Were you jealous? Was that hard for you? Did that compel you to work hard because you figured if you did, someday you'd get your piece of the American dream? That is mitigation. That is letting the judge know who you are, where you're from, where you desired to be. And once you saw an opportunity to get what others had, perhaps things you saw others have throughout your entire life, you seized it. But a man of character, Your Honor, would have said, no, I'm not going to succumb to temptation. I'm going to do what I was elected to do. Instead, I was weak and vulnerable. Now, he covers some of those weaknesses and vulnerabilities inside of that letter. And I'm not saying the whole thing is horrific and awful, but it is a lie. I promise you, it is a lie when he writes in here, money has never driven me. Believing that is like believing McDonald's doesn't want you to buy cheeseburgers and Philip Morris doesn't want you to smoke cigarettes. You can believe it, but you're naive and foolish. It ain't the truth. Of course, money drove him. Of course, the power drove him. And he would have been more authentic in front of the sentencing judge, Walter, if he owned and said that. Instead, he continues to excuse, deny, evade, blame, and worst of all, doesn't focus on the victims. And he does not lay out a clear and compelling plan moving forward of how he is going to make victims whole, how he will never return to another courtroom, and how his once corrupt character has been corrected. This is the reason he got 13 years in jail. I'm going to continue here, and I'm going to drive to Long Beach to see a client who's embracing a slightly different message. And here we go again. Continues to focus on his family. I also have a sense of failure. I failed very few times in anything I set out to do in life. Irrelevant. You failed here. Let's own it. I'm tormented and feel helpless knowing that I will not be able to be there for my kids in the next formative years of my life. Here's a better message. If I was the father my children think I am, and if I am the father that people articulated in the character reference letters that were turned in on my behalf, Your Honor, I would have given more thought to how my choices would impact my kids. It is manipulating a federal judge if you tell them the impact it will have on their children or their family under the idea that if you send me to prison, it will hurt them. You know what judges say? I know because I've been to 1,500 sentencing hearings. Because when I came home from federal prison in 2009 and I went to the halfway house in Hollywood, I had no money, no career yet, nothing to do. You know what I did? I would take my book, Lessons from Prison, that I wrote with Michael Santos in prison, and I would go to sentencing hearings all day to learn. And I would hear judges say, are you trying to guilt me and not sending you to prison? And if you were so concerned about your children, you should have thought about that before you broke the law. Then after sentencing hearings, I would hand out my book to defendants. Indeed, that's probably how I got the first 50% of my clients. I believe in what we do. I needed this book when I was in trouble. The councilman should have read this book. If he did, he wouldn't have turned in this horrific letter. That's my pitch for the book. It's free. A time in their life when they needed their father. I want desperately to do something to make sure my kids will be okay, but I have nothing to offer. Think about that for a moment. God, I don't know how his lawyers allowed this. I want desperately to do something. Imagine if he documented what he's been doing since he got into trouble. Rebuilding, making amends to victim, developing a new skill set, working. sharing that with the judge, then saying, it is devastating that I will be in prison through my own bad choices, but I am committed to being an excellent father and husband to the extent that I can while I'm confined. For that reason, here are plans that I've begun to develop to stay connected with my children, and here's how it will continue in prison. And instead, he plays the victim here. I desperately want to do something, but I have nothing to offer. Of course you have something to offer. You're their father. Show them how you can live through dignity and through a long prison term. My partner, Michael, served 26 consecutive years in prison. We've had clients go to jail for 10, 15, 16 years with young kids, and they manage and they lead. My business partner, Alec Burlikoff, I just put up a video last week about how to parent in prison. Watch it, learn from it, implement it. If Alec did it, so can you. But this messaging doesn't help if you then transition to how you've been financially ruined. And I certainly cannot provide them my most valuable commodity since I will be incarcerated, my time. I can talk about that for days. I'm going to wrap up this video in a few minutes. Frankly, our family's world has been utterly destroyed. It has been 5 years of mental anguish, suffering, and humiliation. My kids used to be happy-go-lucky youngsters that approached life with zeal and amazement. I could talk about that for days. I won't. They enjoyed life and enjoyed being part of their family's public service commitment of helping the community. I mean, it's just, we're dealing in the twilight zone here. Can someone show me the red line edit of this? I need the last red line from the lawyers. Of helping the community. You did anything but help the community. It's why you're going to prison for 13 years. Own it. To then talk about that your children used to be happy and how you've endured 5 years of mental anguish, suffering, and humiliation. Yes, as a consequence of your own choices, you should have told the judge that. Your Honor, I know regardless of what happens at sentencing today, through my own selfish, short-sighted criminal actions, my family and me will suffer for the rest of my life. But it's not about me, Your Honor. It's about the city of Los Angeles that I let down, that I violated, whose trust I stole. And I know the sickening way that people are to view politicians in this country. And guess what, Your Honor? I contributed to it. And I know that I should be held to a different standard. And I know it's part of the reason my sentence is going to be long. But I want the public to know politicians aren't bad. I was a bad apple. I want you to know most politicians are indeed honest and do the right thing. And it was also tragic that the lawyers in their sentencing brief tried to impugn the character of everyone who works in City Hall, insinuating that there is bad conduct all the way around. Is that the right messaging? Good God, no. The biggest problem with this letter, as I wrap it up, it is inauthentic. It is not honest. It does not identify with victims. It does not share if he was born with nothing, how he worked his way up, honestly, when he went rogue and why, other than claiming it wasn't about the money. Nonsense. It tends to be about the money, the trappings of success, rationalizing this is what I'm entitled to. And as he closes, my whole life has been turned upside down, and I regret ever having departed from the values that brought me to public service in the first place. Okay. You regret it? What's the plan to do better? What's the plan to ensure you will never return? Are you educating audiences on the conduct of cheating? I lecture in business schools all across the country on the consequences of cheating. So do clients of mine at White Collar Advice. They don't get paid a dime, but they want to help students understand the consequences of straying from your values. What is he doing to get back on track? I have caused unanticipated collateral damage to people and institutions that I care deeply about. I ask for forgiveness. Have you earned it? It would be better to say, I have yet to earn forgiveness because I know it will last a lifetime, but I know that I can get there day by day, step by step, by being honest and authentic and demonstrating how I am going to make my victims whole and pay back, I guess, this $440,000 that he owes. I owed $535 when I came home. You know what I told my judge? I would pay it. It will take me some time. I did pay it. It took me 10 years, but I paid it. I was authentic, and I built a business that enabled me to help people and pay back my victims. He should have articulated that in this letter, and I can assure you he had more contacts and network and resources than I had when I got sentenced by Judge Wilson in 2008. I have already paid a huge price for the consequences of my actions these past 5 years. Terrible. I have lost my reputation. Awful. Ability to make a living so that I could provide for my kids. We already know that. I've hampered my kids' future and their mental health. Yep. I lost everything. Yep. Your Honor, I ask that you find it in your heart to limit my time of incarceration. Time lost and damage caused cannot be recouped, but I have lots of healing to do. So it's going to be a case study at a sentencing course in a law school, and I ain't a lawyer, but I've been to a lot of sentencing hearings and we've guided a lot of people. Councilman, you can do better in prison. You can stay connected with your children. You can prove worthy of the love and support of your family. You can earn a second chance, but it ain't going to happen by happy talk, rationalizations, cliches, and putting yourself out there as the victim. It don't work. It don't work. I hope you use your time in prison productively. I hope you create a new record on the inside you share with Judge Walter and take the messaging, take what he told you at your sentencing, take it to heart, send it back to him with plans on how you're doing better and correcting and demonstrating that you are different than the person that he just sentenced to 13 years. I don't know. I can't believe his lawyers allowed him to turn in this letter. I think it's tragic and sickening. I'm still looking to see the red line of it. Goodbye.